So with that being said, I think we've reached the appointed hour for our council meeting, so we'll get started. And I'll call the meeting to order. Just before we start tonight's meeting, I'd just like to make mention of the fact that I'm sure it's on everybody's mind about the resurgence of COVID-19 cases locally. I think we're all very concerned about that, and I think we, as members of council and leaders in our community, we have a role to play in terms of trying to encourage behaviors that people may have become a bit complacent about, to try to prevent the further spread of the virus within our community. Certainly just strictly from a numbers perspective, based on the recent surge of cases from Wellington County, Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph should have moved into a red restriction from a provincial framework standpoint, but we haven't yet done so. Or I think there's hope that this most recent surge of cases will get ahead of it and it will subside, and we don't need to go to further restrictions. But certainly, it's the potential is there, and we know how serious the situation is, and so I think we're all working towards trying to do what we can to make sure that this doesn't get into a worse situation for our citizens and our businesses and our community at large. So with that being said, I guess moving on to our agenda, first thing here we have is adoption of the agenda. So I have a recommendation here moved by Lisa, seconded by Dan, that the agenda of November 23rd, 2020 regular meeting of council be accepted and passed. Any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Brings us to disclosure of pecuniary interest. I have none to declare this evening with regard to this agenda. Councillor Yake?
None.
Councillor McCabe?
I have none, Andy.
Okay, Councillor Burke?
No.
And Councillor Hearn?
No.
Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is the presentation for the budget, but I'm thinking it probably would be appropriate to maybe just delay that a little bit. We have a public meeting with regard to plan of subdivision. So with council's indulgence, I would suggest that we delay the presentation and move into the public meeting. So if there is no objections, I think that's what we ought to do. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to read the recommendation to recess and move into the public meeting. So moved by Steve, seconded by Sherry, that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North recess the November 23rd, 2020 regular meeting of council for the purpose of holding a public meeting under the Planning Act. And this is a public meeting, Cache Developments, Arthur, Inc. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we're in recess now. We'll move into the public meeting. I think we have some people waiting on the line to participate, so we'll get right to it. So I'll call the public meeting of November 23rd to order. And again, we'll go through the disclosure of pecuniary interest exercise. I have none to declare. Councillor Hearn?
No.
Okay, Councillor Burke?
No.
Councillor McCabe?
I have none.
And Councillor Yake?
None.
Okay, thank you. The owner applicant in this case is Cache Developments, Arthur, Inc. The location of the subject land, the land subject to the proposed draft plan of subdivision. So wait a minute, let me just back up a little bit. So this is a public meeting for a draft plan of subdivision. And while we're hosting this public meeting here in Wellington North, we are not the decision-making authority in terms of the plan of subdivision. We are the decision-making authority with regard to the zoning bylaw amendments, which may come out of a plan of subdivision. So we're here to collect information for the County of Wellington, who is the decision-making authority on the plan of subdivision. And it's our opportunity to ask questions, make suggestions to the developer in this case, because based on what's been submitted, it will be coming back to us for a zoning bylaw amendment application as well. So just wanted to clarify what this public meeting is about. We're not going to be making any recommendations or passing any bylaw coming out of tonight's meeting. This is an opportunity to have a first look at this proposed development, raise any questions or concerns that we may have, and the public has the opportunity to do that as well for this to move forward to the next step. Okay, so back to the actual details of this application. The land subject to the proposed draft plan of subdivision, file 23T 20202, and the proposed zoning amendment are legally described as part of Park Lots 3 and 4, south side of Domville, part of Park Lots 6 and 7, north side of Smiths, registered plan 60R 1199, parts 3 and 4, registered plan 60R 3022, part 2, and Crown Survey Park Lot 8, north of Smith Street, and registered plan 61R 10854, part 2. Subject property has a total area of 11.08 hectares. And in your package, the map is attached that shows where that is. Purpose and effect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment will rezone the lands from high density residential holding zone, holding R3, low density residential zone R1C, and medium density residential R2 to site specific low density residential zone R1C and high density residential zone R3. Through the zoning amendment process, the applicant is seeking to remove the holding symbol on the lands, which is in place to ensure sufficient municipal service capacity is available for proposed development. The amendment is required in order to facilitate the proposed draft plan of subdivision, 23T-20202. The applications for draft plan of subdivision and zone amendment will result in the creation of a mixed density residential development. Specifically, the overall proposal will create 141 single detached units and 99 townhouse units. A stormwater management area is also proposed as a part of the overall plan. The details of the proposed draft plan of subdivision 23T-20202 is as follows regarding land use: 11 meter, 36 foot detached, 31 units, 12.2 meter or 40 foot detached, 97 units, 13.72 meter or 45 foot detached, 13 units, and 99 units for 6.1 meter townhouses or 20 foot townhouses. Also includes space for a stormwater management pond and a couple of pipe blocks and a right of way for a total area of 11.22 hectares. Okay, how was notice provided to this public meeting?
Notices were mailed to property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, and as well as mailed to the applicable agencies. Signage was posted on the property on October 30th, 2020.
Okay, thank you. Do we have, Linda, are you, or Matthew, who's providing some update here for us?
It's Linda here, Mayor. Thank you. So you've given an excellent overview of the proposal. I'm going to give just a high-level technical comment, as the planners for Cache Development are also on the line, and I believe they have a presentation. So they'll go into more detail about the actual development proposal. So I'm just going to address some of the high-level comments. So this application or this proposal is a public meeting for the plan of subdivision as well as the zone amendment. We're not seeking any recommendations or any endorsement from council tonight. This is strictly to hear public's comments and have the proposal put out there for everybody to see. The lands are currently designated residential, and they're also zoned R3 and R1C, which is going to remain for the most part. The proposed zone amendment will reconfigure some of that a bit, but generally speaking, zoning is pretty much the same as what's on the site currently. They are seeking some relief for some of the setback requirements as well as some of the frontage requirements, and that's further identified in my report with a breakdown. The subject lands are located within the built boundary of Arthur, and that's important to note because you want to see a good amount of your development occurring within the built boundary. So this helps to meet that target, that 20% target. So this is a good development from that perspective. I'd also like to point out that there is a draft plan of subdivision currently on these lands, and the report identifies it on figure 4. This draft plan of subdivision was draft approved in 1993. It's quite old, and it does show a huge school block of about 4 hectares or 3.5 hectares. That school block is no longer required. A school has been built elsewhere in Arthur. And so the township, or sorry, the school board is no longer in need of that block. So that's a big reason for this new plan that's coming forward. Is clearly those lands can be developed with something else. And given that it's designated residential, obviously resident housing is more appropriate use. Also, that old draft plan of subdivision doesn't really identify a stormwater management block, and the new plan does. So that's a good thing too. The circulation for comment was completed on Friday. That was the deadline for comments. At the time that we drafted the report, we hadn't heard from all of the commenting agencies, but what we have currently before us is we've got comments from Bell Canada. They have no concerns. The school board has no concerns. Source water protection has no concerns. They do have some conditions they'd like to see as part of the draft approval, which we will coordinate. Triton Engineering, the township's engineers, have provided some preliminary comments. They have some further work with the stormwater management design. Their report, I think, is part of your agenda as well, so you can see where their comments are, but most of them center around stormwater management. And also, I understand as of today, we have received comments from the Grand River Conservation Authority as well, and they have raised some questions, and they need clarification on some of the stormwater management design, as well as a bit of grading and something to do with the EIS. I've just briefly seen their comments, but they had some concerns with some of the material. So they will be working with them to address that.
Sorry, Linda, we also listed on the agenda our comments from Linda White and George White. And
Yep.
I also received further correspondence, and I will mention that when we get to that.
Okay, thank you. We have received some comments from the public, from neighbors as well. And as you had mentioned, the Whites, we've received a letter from them. Most of the comments and the concerns were related to the drainage, the existing drainage of the lands, and potential flooding of the neighboring properties once this development moves forward, and some concerns with the density of the proposed plan. At this point, those are all my comments. I'd like to provide an opportunity to hear the planners for the application, and then I'm available for questions.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Next on we have Stephen Kloss. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
You hear me okay? Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, we got you.
Great.
Please go ahead.
And I believe Karen has my slideshow that she's going to put up.
Yeah. So when we put that up, no one can see anybody. So as soon as he's done, I'll pull it back down so everybody has a view. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Karen.
So as I was introduced already, but my name is Steve Kloss. I'm a planner with Glenn Schnarr and Associates. And I'm here today on behalf of Cachet Homes. In the meeting with me today is Marcus Gagliardi from Cachet, and I'm here to discuss the aforementioned application for a draft plan of subdivision and associated zoning bylaw amendment within the town of Arthur. Next slide, please. So the subject property is in the northwest part of Arthur. It consists of 3 parcels. Could I have the next slide, please? So it consists of 3 parcels, which together total approximately 28 acres of land. It's one of the largest undeveloped pieces of land within Arthur's built-up area. The legal address is 321 Domville Street, though it only actually has about 66 feet of frontage on Domville. The majority of frontage is on Preston Street North. The majority of the lands consist of fields with a treed area in the southeast corner. There's an existing man-made drainage ditch running east-west through the center of the property. And the lands to the west are primarily used for industrial and employment purposes, including Musashi Auto Parts. The lands to the north, south, and east are primarily residential, and Arthur Public School is less than 200 meters east. So the proposal, as you know, consists of 2 applications. There's a draft plan of subdivision and a zoning bylaw amendments, and a total of 240 new homes are proposed, with 141 detached homes and 99 townhomes. It includes 5 new internal streets and a stormwater management pond. And as part of the developments, Preston Street North will be modernized, including a sidewalk built along the entire east side, which would create a pedestrian connection between the subdivision and the rest of Arthur. Next slide, please. So here's the complete draft plan of subdivision. There are 4 types of residential lots being proposed. So the detached lots with 45-foot frontages are shown in gray. Detached lots with 40-foot frontages are shown in, the 45-foot frontages are dark green. The 40-foot frontages are gray. Detached with 36-foot frontages are yellow. And then finally, townhomes with 20-foot frontages are shown in orange. The proposal also includes a 2.59 acre stormwater management pond shown in blue, and this will be built around the western portion of the existing drainage ditch, while the eastern portion will be piped. So 5 internal streets are proposed, and there'll be 3 access points onto Preston Street North. Each street will have a public sidewalk on one side, which is consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. Note that Street A is labeled Adelaide Street Extension. So the land separating this street from the existing Adelaide Street is privately owned, but the subdivision is designed in a way that it could be connected in the future, and Adelaide would be continuous from Tucker Street to Preston Street. The layout's been arranged in order to efficiently use land with a relatively even mix of detached homes and townhouses. And there's a transition between the existing comparably lower density housing and the mixed use density housing, so the mixed density housing that's proposed. You'll note that the outer ring of the development would be entirely detached lots. So existing homes would back onto detached lots, while the townhome blocks are all in the interior of the land or abutting onto Preston Street North. The compact nature and the location of the proposed subdivision means that new homes will be walking distance from schools, from Arthur's downtown, and from the employers to the west. Next slide, please. So we have some renderings of homes that Cachet has built in other communities. The homes in Arthur may not be these models exactly, but this provides a visual style of the types of homes that are proposed. So the images here are the 40-foot detached lots. Next slide, please. These are 36-foot detached lots. Next slide, please. And here's an example of a townhome block. Next slide, please. So the lands are designated residential under Wellington County's official plan. The official plan forecasts that the county's population will increase by 48% between 2016 and 2041. And 82% of that growth is to be accommodated in settlements, including Arthur. Arthur's population in particular is projected to increase by 35%, or 945 people by 2041. Since these lands are the largest greenfield area within Arthur's built boundary, they represent a prime opportunity to assist the county in meeting its growth targets in an efficient and sustainable manner. The county's housing policies call for increased density and a greater variety of housing types than traditionally has been the norm in small towns. The proposal is more compact than most of the existing housing in Arthur, but it's still compatible with the character of the village. It's a form of sensitive intensification that's suitable to the small town. And this is in line with provincial policies as well. They also call for increased density in new residential developments. It also provides a significant amount of housing in close proximity to Arthur's employment area, so new residents would have the opportunity to live and work in Arthur without having to commute. Next slide, please. So this is the current zoning on the property. The lands are split between 3 zones under Wellington North zoning bylaw. The western roughly 2/3 are zoned HR3, which is high density residential with the H being a holding symbol. The eastern roughly 1/3 is zoned R1C, low density residential, while the small piece of land fronting onto Domville Street is zoned R2, medium density residential. The holding symbol is in place to restrict development until 3 requirements are met. And these requirements are that municipal water and sewer capacity needs to be available to service the lands, and stormwater management must be adequately addressed. And we'll be working with the township and county to ensure these requirements are met. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw, which is required to facilitate the plan of subdivision. As you can see, the zoning amendment would retain the 2 predominant zones in the property, but the layout is rearranged and exceptions are added to both zones. So the R3 zone, high density, would apply to the townhouse blocks. The exception would reduce the minimum lot size, as well as the rear, front, and side yard setbacks to allow for more compact development. The setback for garages would remain the standard 6 meters, while the setback for the main portion of the dwellings would be reduced to 2 meters. This creates more of a pedestrian-friendly community where porches rather than garages define the streetscape. The R1C zone is the township's most compact, low-density residential zone. This zone would apply to all detached lots, including the single lot fronting onto Domville Street. Similar to the proposed R3 zone, the exception would reduce the minimum lot area as well as the side, rear, and front yard setbacks, except for garages. And the exception zone would also eliminate the maximum coverage requirement. The standard's 40%, but this was implemented with larger lot sizes in mind. Lot coverage and scale of housing will be adequately controlled by the established setbacks. And as you can see, the stormwater management pond and drainage pipe blocks will be zoned open space, and this is consistent with similar features throughout Arthur and Wellington North. Next slide, please. So a number of studies were submitted in support of the application, and they're currently under review by the township, the county, and external agencies. Or as you've heard, we've recently received some of the reviews. So the planning justification report was prepared by my firm, and today's presentation has largely been a summary of that report. The functional servicing and stormwater management report prepared by URBTech Engineering, and this outlines how the proposed development can be accommodated by the village's existing and planned water, sanitary, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure. The traffic impact assessment prepared by Crozier provides analysis of the anticipated traffic impacts of the proposed development, and Crozier recommends the modernization of Preston Street, but otherwise no road improvements are recommended. Also submitted were an environmental impact statement, environmental site assessments, and a geotechnical report. And these are all publicly available with the township. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the proposed development would create 240 new homes, 141 detached and 99 townhomes. It's consistent with provincial and county policies. It'll contribute to the county's intensification target for Wellington North and for Arthur, and proposes an increase in density that's appropriate to the small town context. It'll make use of existing water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure. The internal streets and Preston Street will be lined with sidewalks, making them both convenient for cars and for pedestrians. And the technical studies submitted in support of the application demonstrate that it's supported. Next slide, please. So I'm available if you have any questions or comments. I'll try to respond to them tonight, or I'll commit to getting you answers after tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. So we have a number of items in our agenda of correspondence received for council's review. Do we have any further correspondence in regard to this application?
Yes, we received correspondence from the William Linton Estate dated November 18th, just requesting written notification of decisions. And then the Grand River Conservation Authority that Linda had mentioned, and they're asking for deferral of decision until there's some clarification, modifications to the stormwater management design.
Okay. Thank you. So in the agenda, if you're following along, it says that the bylaw will be considered at the regular council meeting following the public meeting. That is in fact not the case. So we're dealing with a public meeting tonight again, just as a reminder, for the draft plan of subdivision with the decision-making authority belonging to the County of Wellington for that. And then with public meeting also deals with zoning bylaw amendments that are a result of that draft plan of subdivision. And we will not be dealing with those immediately either, for a number of reasons. One being the holding capacity because of sewage treatment capacity, as well as further information is going to be required from this application before we can process that. So with that being said, I'll open the floor for any questions or comments. Karen, did I miss something?
I just want to point out the whites are on. Brent McKee is on, Mike DeWitt is on, and Marcus is on. I'm just looking, there's several people still as an attendee. If anyone in that list, Camilla, Campbell, HQ, Jim, Keegan, Scott, Tammy, or Tracy, if you want to speak to this, can you please raise your electronic hand? All right, Scott, I will move you in as a participant. A panelist, sorry. Tracy? Okay, so to everyone who's signed in, the mayor will call on you, and if you're not speaking, please be sure your microphone's off. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Karen. So we have a number of people, the public registered this evening to participate. You're probably going to have to remind me who's who so we don't forget everybody, Karen, but does anybody want to volunteer to go first on this point? I'll open the floor for members of the public. Okay, the whites, George and Linda, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Can you hear us?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Yeah, we have some concerns about this development. Mostly has to do with the swim pond and the water that will be going through our property. Our property is 162 and 166 Conestoga Street. And right now there is an easement. There's a municipal drain that goes through underground till almost to the end of our property. And then it becomes a ditch and drains out there. We know that we have been, we can't say we don't get these 100-year storms anymore. We're definitely getting the rains and such. Last year, Conestoga Street was out in front of our place was flooded. Our lawn was under water because it couldn't take the water from that particular storm. And there's been other incidents as well. We are quite concerned about flooding on our property. And I guess we just need more clarification that there isn't going to be a water issue.
When we built the, it's Georgia, when we built our house, when we took the topsoil off, we brought an engineer in for the footings for the house, and the water table was 6 inches below the topsoil. So we had to go up from the topsoil for the footings. We couldn't go down. And the water table in here is very, very high. And it's all swamp in here. It was always known as Stumptown. And I don't know what are you going to do for footings. And if you build up, it's going to create a backup for the, maybe not for much, but our neighbors to the west of us. They've been, the one directly beside has been flooded a couple times. When we built the house here, that drainage ditch, the open part was cleaned out. And I believe 2 years ago, it had to be cleaned out again. There was, I think, about 3-4 feet of silt in it again from the storm sewers. So there's definitely lots of water there. And if we get the water table too high, it'll probably kill the bush beside us. And it's just the water, that's the big thing. And then, I think I should say there's one other, is the houses. What is the height of the houses behind us, the they're individual houses. I presume they're 2-story, but what are the height of the houses? Are we going to be looking into a wall, or are they just normal 2 stories?
Okay. Stephen, did you want to answer?
So the houses will be standard 2-story houses. So it won't, the transitional element, the statement that it's compatible with the small town character, that largely applies to height. So the height of the houses will be kind of consistent with the rest of the town. In terms of the drainage, we did have a stormwater management report prepared by URBTech Engineering, and they concluded that it won't create any new upstream issues from the subject lands. We can bring your further questions to them, but there's no drainage issues are anticipated.
Well, we've lived here for 12 years now, and there is flooding happens here all the time. And are these individual houses, do they have basements? Or are they just slabs?
I believe they'll have basements.
So there's the water is an issue in here. I'm just stating that we know from a fact it's an issue. The neighbors have issues. And anyways, it just needs to be addressed, that's all.
So good evening, Town Council.
Just a second, Scott. I just want to finish one up before we move to the next one. But yeah, I see your hand, and I see Marcus has his hand up as well. Do George and Linda, do you have anything further at this point?
No, the water is our main concern, and I had looked at it's kind of hard to tell from the plan of subdivision how things are going to go. I did receive a copy of the water from Linda Redmond, but I'm sorry, I don't understand a lot of what it was about. It's an engineering document, so we just want to make sure that the water issues are addressed, and that we're not going to end up getting flooded out every year because of this new subdivision.
The stormwater management coming in off Walton Street now isn't adequate for when you get the big storms. Our lot between us and our neighbor to the east of us, often there's a small creek running down through it when there's a flash flood. So the stormwater management tile there isn't carrying the water anyway. So, and there's been a lot of silt come out of it over the years. Like I said, it had to be cleaned out after 10 years, and it had to have been over 4 feet of silt at the end of the tile. So anyways, it's just bringing the water issues to light. That's all.
Okay. I think from a township submission perspective, that piece is certainly incomplete at this point, and there's more work to be done. And I think staff certainly recognize that given the location and the topography of it, that we really have to make sure that this is right before this can proceed. And I think your concerns, certainly, I hear them loud and clear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, I'll move to Scott, and then I'll move to you, Marcus.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, do you mind if I jump in? It's more of an answer to the White family.
Okay, sorry about that. Go ahead.
And appreciate Scott letting me go first. And I just wanted to thank council and the public for coming out this evening. And they're all valid comments, valid concerns. But just speaking to a bit of the stormwater management and drainage for the site. As part of our future approvals and as part of the approval process, I think correct me if I'm wrong, Linda, but we're going to be required to manage, I think we're managing approximately 33 hectares of external flows coming onto our site. And they are valid concerns raised by the White family. We're aware of them. So we're going to be working very, very closely with not only municipal and county staff, but also the GRCA as well, to make sure, number one, that the stormwater management pond is functioning properly and efficiently, but also that, you know, there may be opportunities for us to implement other drainage features such as LID components elsewhere on our site to help manage some of the filtration and water balance, not only on our site, but as well as some of the external flows that are coming onto our site. So hopefully in a post-development scenario, it'll actually improve some of the drainage and water balance issues on not only the White family property, but also the other properties that are surrounding our site. That's obviously the overall objective for us. We don't want to make things worse, we want to make them better. So that's.
Okay. Thank you, Marcus. Scott?
Yeah, so good evening. I don't mean to beat the dead horse of the water issue. I am the direct descendant of that 2-year storm. As the drainage ditch was unable to drain properly, the water did back up into my basement. It's a full tile system that runs, I believe, west-east on all the properties all the way out to Smith Street, if I'm not mistaken. I am, other than the Whites, I am the lowest house on the street to the west. And I believe that it flooded due to the ditch had not been cleaned out in for how many years, and it just couldn't handle that type of water. But yeah, this has all been well documented here in the last few minutes of comments. So yes, I am very concerned about how that tile that is currently in place is going to interact with any modifications, so that I don't be the descendant of a full subdivision backing up down the way here. So anyway, that was, I'm sorry, they've actually, they said it all for me, so I appreciate that, George and Linda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Next, I see Brent McKee. Brent, go ahead. You're on mute there, Brent.
There, do you hear me now? Hello, council and everybody. Yeah, just along with the water, right now, the water is only a few inches below. I have a hole in my basement. We're doing some work down there, and the water's already just a few inches below where, you know, my floor. So I can, and Scott is lower than us. The water's a huge concern for all of us along here, because we drain into that ditch. The other concern we do have is behind us in this bush, there is quite a bit of wildlife. And then I guess you would say to the west, I think you're the west of the bush, where the subdivision is planned, in lots 118, 119, 120 and up through there. There's a bunch of scrubland in there. That's where a lot of deer do their bedding and feeding and raise their young and stuff in there. Just that, you know, there is wildlife there. Another concern we do have is this street. I'm going to assume that there is plans, Stephen, to bring traffic out to Adelaide Street at some point in time. This street is a big street, fast-moving street, even considering there's a public school right across the road from us. I believe it's supposed to be a 30 zone, but traffic flies up and down here like it's a freeway, you know, on Conestoga. So, you know, if we add that many more cars, what are we going to do to try to slow traffic down? That's got to be part of the concern here as well. So there's a few questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Stephen or Marcus, do you have anything you'd like to add at this point?
Just with regards to Adelaide Street, I mean, it isn't the portion of land separating the subject lands from the existing Adelaide Street is privately owned. So it's designed that it can at some point be extended. In terms of traffic, I think when that time comes, traffic calming measures can be explored. But I mean, at this stage, this proposal would not see Adelaide Street connected, not yet.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I would imagine, at least for the time being or the immediate future, the county or township would likely implement some sort of approval condition, either making that a turning circle that dead ends. So likely all traffic from the subdivision would be directed towards Preston Street, which I believe was contemplated in our traffic study as well. So just to add to what Stephen mentioned, there would likely be an approval condition to either have a turning bulb until the future connection can be made, with all connections thus far going to Preston Street. And I'm sure if and when it does connect to Adelaide, there would be some holistic traffic calming measures that could be implemented by ourselves or the town.
I can give a bit of a general response with regards to the wildlife on the lots. I recognize that there may be wildlife on the lot. The truth is that it is zoned residential. We have prepared an environmental impact statement, which is being reviewed by GRCA. So ecological impacts are going to be mitigated as much as possible, but it is land that's targeted for residential development ultimately.
Okay, thank you. Mike DeWitt, did you, I see you're on my screen, and would you like to speak at this point? Yeah, go ahead, you're on mute right now.
There, you got us?
Yep.
All right,
Here you
thank
know.
you for the opportunity. Yeah, actually, I had some concerns as far as the water, because I live just up the road from McKees and Scott, and so that's all been said already. Same thing, we're tied into the same tile as Scott and McKees. I look at all this residential zoning, and I never see any green land set aside for that natural aspect that should be part of every bit of town, I think. And you know, you drive through parts of Guelph, and there are sections in there that are set aside. We have the river, you know, there's a trail through there, but that's kind of a dicey situation too, as far as anybody really wanting to walk down there. Part of it is private land, to the best of my knowledge. So, you know, to already have a zone that's inhabited, and not just a pass-through zone for deer, but inhabited by deer and turkeys and whatever else there is in there. And there is lots. I took a walk through there, and there's plenty of wildlife in that zone, just on that corner that Brent McKee was talking about. Why do we always have to destroy everything for the sake of a couple extra houses? I think the development is going to come regardless, but could we not set something aside for the wildlife as well? That would be my last little concern, other than the other two. Adelaide Street extension, I wasn't really too much in favor of, and the water, stormwater management was my biggest concern. So I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Karen, have we got other people registered to speak on this? That's only the people I can see so far.
Yeah, there's no one pre-registered. I just want to ask again, anyone who's signed in as an attendee, if anyone would like to speak to this, please raise your virtual hand. Sorry, Tracy?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, Tracy Swift, I'm sorry about that. Yes, I moved you in. Tracy Swift is here to speak to it, Your Worship.
Hi, thank
Okay.
you for the time. I live at 303 Donville Street, and I have my neighbor Wanda here from 305. And although the development is not directly behind our property, and it has been commented that it's private land, we also, not to beat it to death, have a water problem in our backyard. And the private land behind our property and our backyards do tend to flood during storms, and it takes days for that pool of water to actually dissipate. I just want to make sure that this development is not going to make that condition worse, and leave it up to the next person who may develop that land, whether it is Cache or the private developer, the private landowner currently that owns that property, be left with us to deal with that in the future. That was our concern. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any others, Karen? You're muted, by the way. I see your hand there, Brent. Just hang on.
I've just got an email from our development clerk, and I'm just checking something. I think there's a letter with some concerns. Just give me a second, okay?
Okay, thank you.
I have it here. It is from, we had received another one from the estate of Mr. Linton. This is by the same person. I didn't have this before the meeting. They have some concerns. Concerns are she lives at 172 and another home at 202 Conestoga. Concerns about there being denied access by a road when the extension of Walton Street never happened because of a new residential build, and wondering if there'll be an opportunity to develop behind their lots with an extension of Adelaide Street. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm not understanding exactly what they're asking there, Karen. So is it the private lands between the existing lots and the proposed new development? Is that what they're asking about?
Sorry, I just closed it again.
I think that's a safe assumption, Mayor Lennox, that they're talking about the privately held lands, not necessarily the lands that are being proposed for this development.
Yeah, I did notice there is some, looks like designated lots in that area in the existing homes along Conestoga and Cache's property, and if that's what they're asking for.
I've
If I may,
just shared my screen, and those are their two concerns.
Okay.
Sorry, Linda.
yeah, that property is, they're referring to those 4 lots that are in between the proposal and the properties on Conestoga. There's a section that's actually landlocked. They're talking about that parcel. And
Okay, so there's no street access to those now?
no,
Not even right away?
No, there's not.
Okay.
They own a lot that does front onto Conestoga. And then they own that piece in behind, but they are held in separate title.
Okay. So it would, if Adelaide Street were to be connected, would that allow them access to the street?
No. Because there's another parcel between them and that unopened Adelaide. There's another.
Okay.
Yeah. I believe
so it'd be up
according to their letter, it sounds like at one time maybe there was access onto an unopened road allowance to the south, which is now a private lot. It's a vacant.
Okay. So if they wanted access for those lots, they would need to negotiate that access with Cache.
With Cache or perhaps the land north of them, if Adelaide was to connect to the Cache lands, there would be an opportunity perhaps to do some type of proposal or some type of development off of, like a road off of Adelaide, or an internal road, or it would be limited. I'm not sure you'd be able to get, you might be able to get a road in there with small lots
Okay.
to work together with.
But that's really it's really outside of the scope of this application at this point.
Absolutely. It's already landlocked. There's nothing, this development is not changing that fact.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else, Karen? I've got another one that, a couple, staying on Marcus. Any others that want to comment before I move on?
There's no one as an attendee. Everyone that's a panelist is still on. So if anyone's wanting to speak again.
Okay, I see Marcus had his hand up and Brent McKee had his hand up. I'm going to go to Marcus first, Brent, just to maybe he can add some clarification, and I'll come back to you. Go ahead, Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to reiterate our position to council, as well as all the residents that have come out this evening. Ultimately, we realize most of the concerns are stemmed around the drainage and stormwater management of this site. We knew prior to purchasing this site that it would be a bit of a scientific exercise in making sure the drainage and the stormwater functions properly. And you know, we haven't missed anything yet. And we've got the comments from the GRCA now, which was a critical piece to us moving the project forward. We've got the comments from Triton, who's the town's engineer as well. And you know, we're going to look forward to working with them over the next several months to ensure that we have the proper stormwater management strategy to bring this site to fruition. So everything the residents have said, everything that staff have said is valid. And we appreciate the feedback, and we're going to make sure the situation post-development is a much better situation than what currently exists. So I just wanted to reassure everyone in that regard, and let them know that all their concerns are valid, and we're going to make sure that we address all of them in our upcoming submission.
Okay, thank you. Brent, I'll go back to you then.
Thank you. It was mentioned here that everybody's gonna, they're really aiming all the traffic to go out to Preston Street. Is there a plan for how they're gonna flow that traffic off of Preston Street on to Highway 6, or Smith Street? I mean, roughly 2 cars per house, 480 cars probably flowing in and out of that one street every day. Because we're being told they're not planning on bringing cars out onto Conestoga Street from Adelaide. Just seems like a lot of cars to be brought out onto Smith Street. What's off of Preston onto Smith? What's the plan for dealing with traffic out on that main road?
Okay, Stephen, did you want to tackle that?
Well, basically what I can give you is a summary of the traffic impact assessment. They did an assessment of the existing road infrastructure, and the recommendation was that the existing roads will be sufficient to manage the anticipated traffic that will come from the subdivision. Other than, of course, the modernization of Preston Street itself. That was the only recommended upgrade that came out of the traffic assessment.
So 450 cars a day are going to deal with a stop sign?
I don't think it's anticipated to be 450 cars at peak hours, but
every house has 2 cars, and everybody leaves to go to work every day, and everybody comes home every day. So how many is that?
I think what's anticipated at peak hours is between 150 and 200 car trips based on average household size and average travel.
Yeah, so sorry, I don't want to jump in, but the peak hour travel or the peak hour cars was determined to be between 151 and 196 cars. And our traffic engineer and our traffic study provided analysis for a number of streets, including Smith, Frederick, Conestoga, and that was the number they came up with based on their modeling analysis. So I don't disagree with you. It will generally be 2 cars per household, and that's actually what we're designing for with a double car garage. So based on their peak hour analysis, they came up with between 151 and 196 cars. So not all the cars will be traveling at the same time or exactly at the same time, but those are the numbers that they came up with and determined that the existing infrastructure or existing services are sufficient to accommodate what we're proposing today.
Okay. So I just would reiterate too that this is at the beginning stages of this process. Our staff will be reviewing a number of these studies and applications, make sure that we believe that they're appropriate. So we are collecting the concerns this evening, and certainly that will help focus some of our review process as we move through this development process. Scott, you're muted, by the way.
Back to the stormwater thing. So on the current property, the farmland there now, that is that's in the form of a ditch. And sorry, this is more of a design question, really, guys. What is that supposed to look like in the end? So that ditch will be gone, and I'm assuming it's like a sewer pipe. Is that sort of the idea there, or will that be a concrete type ditch still, or what is the proposed idea for the removal of that ditch?
Okay.
It's really a design
Anybody
question.
want to tackle that one? Marcus, did you want to tackle that?
Yeah, at sort of high level, I mean, I don't have my civil engineer here, but at a high level, the ditchness isn't necessarily being removed. It's essentially being preserved. With one road crossing, obviously, we've got, I believe it's Street D or Street C that crosses the existing ditch. And then we've got 2, at the moment, they're proposed to be 6-meter piped blocks. And I don't necessarily think they'll be concrete blocks, but they'll be piped. And the ditch will essentially be preserved and flow into the stormwater management pond. That's the intent of the design right now. Obviously, we got some comments back from the town's engineer as well as the Conservation Authority. Believe it or not, the Conservation Authority believes the ditch is a regulated water course, and they'd actually prefer that we keep it open. But I think there's actually some advantages to us using the strategy that we've proposed, and we're going to work with them to come up with the appropriate strategy to make sure that everything works efficiently and actually is an improvement for the area. So to answer your question, it's piped in 2 areas and then flows through its current location into the stormwater management pond.
And our current tile system would still flow as it is today. Is that the idea?
Correct. If not better.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, then I think we'll close off that section and we'll open it up for questions or comments from council.
So if you spoke to this issue, I'm going to ask you to leave the meeting. I had a problem the last time when I removed people, then you can't join in as an attendee again. So if you remove yourself, and you should be able to go back to an attendee and hear what's going on. Otherwise, I can remove you. I just can't be sure you can get back on.
Okay. So yeah, from this point on, I'll be restricting the comments to council at this point. to reiterate, this is the beginning of a process. So if you have further things that come to mind, please feel free to submit those in writing, and we will consider those as part of the application process.
Okay, so I'm going to start taking people out of the meeting then.
Okay.
I hope you can get back on. Yeah, it's not going to let you rejoin. So if you want to remove yourself, otherwise I'll remove you and you won't be able to hear the rest of the meeting. Okay. Stephen? Mike? Marcus? I just need Brent, Mike and Marcus, please. Oh, leave Marcus and Scott in. Sorry. I just got a message. But...
Sorry, Karen, I think we just lost Steve.
Okay. All right, Mike, I'm going to remove you. Oh, okay. No. Okay. I've got all council, right? Good. That's the important thing. Okay.
Yeah, you haven't kicked any of us out yet.
Okay, and Marcus is here to speak. And Linda? Yeah, okay.
And do we need to get Steve back?
I'll
wait,
try and
I can do that. Just a minute.
Or are you comfortable proceeding, Marcus, with if he's not able to be part of it?
No, he's here now. Okay, so
okay.
There we go.
Okay.
Sorry, Steve.
As we get this all sorted out, so Councillor McCabe had his hand up, so we'll let him get started. Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Andy, or thank you, Mayor Lennox, and thanks for everyone participating, and thanks for the residents that are surrounding this possible development. Just when I was going through this public agenda, it just seems to me that there is an awful pile of housing jammed in on top of each other with little regard to spacing between the neighbors. And then maybe Darren, if you can elaborate a little bit on this. It looks like the lot coverage proposed is changed, or the planners are proposing none. Would this mean that a person could literally build a house that stretches like the whole length of a property with very little like grass or any area beside or any space, I guess, between houses? And 6 feet from the road for the dwelling seems to be, I guess, kind of close as well. And I was going to ask about the GRCA, so I'll wait and read that later, I suppose. But yeah, it seems like this is a lot more dense than what the provincial standards are. And again, they just seem to be really packed in. So Darren, I wonder if you could maybe elaborate a little bit on that, if you didn't mind.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mayor Lennox. So if the zoning bylaw were approved with the setbacks as proposed and with no lot coverage, they could build right up to the minimum setbacks for front, rear, and front yard setbacks.
Well, okay, thank you. I guess, sorry, Mayor Lennox, if I can keep going. Does this seem a little more dense than what the PPS would require, Darren, or Linda for that matter?
So does anybody want to tackle that one? I have some questions with regard to our local density targets for Wellington County as well. What are our current density targets for greenfield development like this? And how does that compare to this application? So I think that's kind of what Councillor McCabe is asking.
Yeah, that's where I was angling towards. And then, yeah, I was just going to make a quick mention about the stormwater as well. But
so through you, Mayor, it's Linda. The density requirements in the OP are 6.5 units per acre or 16 units per hectare. So this development will have a density of 21.39 units per hectare. So they exceed the density target under our.
Okay. Thank you.
By over 3.
By over 5, Steve.
Sorry, I must not have heard you correctly. Sorry.
Yeah,
So
16
this-
16 is our requirement under the OP, and this development will have a density of 21 per hectare.
Thank you.
Not that I want to cut you off, Steve. I just want to let other people have a chance to ask questions. Oh, Marcus, did you want to speak to that specifically?
I wanted to speak to the just a little bit on the zoning, just very quickly. So the way we've structured the amending document, and Stephen can jump in if he likes. We've got actually 2 front yard setback minimums. We've got a 2-meter setback for the dwelling, which allows us to structure the porches and stairs in a way that they're pushed towards the street to kind of activate the streetscape. But the actual setback to the garage door or garage face is approximately 20 feet, which is usually enough to accommodate your standard size pickup truck. So in the driveway, and then obviously we've planned for 2 garage spaces internally as well. So you'd have approximately 4 parking spaces per lot with the zoning we've proposed. And then with respect to setbacks between the houses, I think the existing interior side yard setback is 1.2 meters in the existing zone that is there today in the R1C zone. We've proposed to maintain the 1.2 meter setback, so no amendment in that regard. And then what we've proposed is a reduction of 0.6 meters on one side of the house, which allows us to, with a 36-foot lot, for example, it allows us to use the setbacks in a way that allows us to build for 2 garage spaces internal for a 36-foot house. So that ensures that all the houses with the driveways are getting approximately 4 parking spaces per lot. If some people end up not using one of their garage spaces and using it for storage, it still ensures there's adequate parking throughout the subdivision. So with respect to spacing between the houses, we've only reduced one of the side yards. And I'll let Stephen confirm that for me, but I think that's what we had in mind.
That what you say is correct. So what would be is the current standard would ensure a minimum of 2.4 meters between houses, and this would reduce the total space between houses to a minimum of 1.8. So it's actually only a reduction of 60 centimeters compared to the existing standards.
Okay, thank you. Other members of council, do you have some questions, comments? Councillor Burke, go ahead.
Yes, so I too have some concerns about the density. I was glad to hear about from the residents about the water. With a subdivision proposal like this, should we not be looking at some kind of parkland or green space within the development? I guess that's sort of my concern. And we did hear that from a couple of other residents as well. Some kind of open space or green space to be left.
Okay.
So under the Planning Act, the municipality is allowed to take 5% of the total land area as parkland, or 5% of the value of the land as cash in lieu of parkland. And my understanding is that at this point we're proposing cash in lieu rather than parkland. So the parkland, you'd get the finances for parkland just to situate it in a different location.
Okay. Mike, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, Mayor Lennox, I just wanted to share with council, when we initially met with Marcus and the group back, I think it was February. Marcus, we can all think back to different times at that way back in February, but we talked about the parkland piece to a certain degree. Obviously the stormwater pond or the area that's associated with the stormwater pond is a large area. So we've talked about with Marcus and his group about potentially, as it relates to trails, things that were tied into the stormwater pond in addition to the cash in lieu that Stephen spoke to. So I want council to be aware that those conversations happen, and I think Marcus and his group are still open to those conversations. But certainly if parkland or a dedicated parkland is something that council is adamant about, this is a great opportunity to have those conversations. So.
Okay, Marcus?
Yeah, just thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to reiterate what Mike was saying, we did meet actually a number of occasions with Mike, Dale, and Linda and their staff, and it was back in January, February, and probably just before the world kind of ended for all of us. And we did discuss that, you know, incorporating some trails and some integrative landscaping into the stormwater management blocks, and we're still not opposed to that. And to be honest, the comments about park space are valid, and we'll have to take them back and look at it as a holistic comment as we look at the overall plan. But no, we're not opposed to incorporating some of the trails and potentially even a park space itself. It may lend itself well to the community and selfishly even for ourselves as a marketing tool in the future. And just to speak to the stormwater block, it ended up being a little bit larger than we initially expected at our preliminary meetings with Mike and his team, just because we are managing approximately 33 hectares of external flows. So some of those drainage concerns and stormwater issues that you hear from the residents and the councilors, which are entirely valid, we're managing those by taking in 33 hectares of flows onto our site, which made the pond area, I think, which is 2.6 acres, a little bigger than we originally expected. I think when we met with Mike and his team, we expected the pond to be approximately 1.8 to 1.9 acres, which would have left us a little bit more room to, you know, accommodate a little more park space, perhaps some integrated trails. And we originally intended that the pond would be more of a linear pond and kind of flow with the drainage channel. But because of the external flows, it ended up being a little bigger. But to answer the question in a nutshell, we're definitely open to discussion. We'll have to take it back and look at the entire plan as a whole and perhaps integrate some trails or even a park block for that matter, and really give it some thought. So no, it's a valid comment from the councillor and valid point from Mike as well.
Yeah, and I would just add from my perspective, it's very hard to visualize what kind of useful parkland area that stormwater management area could represent. I mean, if it's a pond, certainly playing in the middle of the pond, unless it's frozen, is not practical. So without some sort of visualization of what that's going to look like, it's really hard to know whether that's adequate parkland. I mean, we're talking 240 units. I would anticipate some of them would at least need some space to go and take a walk or walk their dog, send their kids out to play. That, you know, we're going to add that kind of number of units. There's going to be a need for some sort of green space of some sort, and until we have a visual representation of what that stormwater area is going to look like, it's really hard to know how much more we're going to need. Councillor Yake.
Thank you, Mayor Lennox. I think aside from the neighbors' concerns, which are seriously valid concerns and certainly need to be addressed first and foremost before anything moves ahead. I guess I have a couple of concerns in regards to the lot reductions, the sizes and the amounts of the lot reductions. Now, we've been told that's based on the design of the houses and how they're set back. But you know, you're asking for some big reductions there, and you know, does that meet the rest of the village of Arthur? Does it satisfy? You know, does it all look the same? I'm not sure if it does. And lastly, I think Councillor Burke brings up a very valid question in regards to parkland. I mean, my preference would be to see parkland there rather than cash in lieu. We know that the minute that subdivision is completed, people are going to be wanting to park in that area. So we've seen it happen before. We've developed parks, you know, around the community to fit into certain areas. So I think, I really honestly think that there has to be a park, some sort of parkland put into this development. The trails, I mean, that's not for little kids or children. And I think a lot of this, the people that move into this development may have a lot of young children. So I'm really concerned about that as well. But so just those three issues that I have on my mind.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hearn, do you have any questions, comments at this point?
They're all pretty similar, basically to what the other councillors have said. I think my biggest concern, I mean, when you look at it holistically, it does seem to be fairly squishy, and you talk about the lot sizes and everything. To me, I mean, we've said that it fits in with Arthur. This doesn't seem to fit in with Arthur, with the squishiness and the feel and the compactness of it, especially since it's missing some sort of green space or trail system. Our rec master plan, said that trails were really one of the top activities here in Wellington North. People like to walk, and they need to walk their dog and connect to the other things that we have available. So, I mean, while it is a difficult balance and we need all of this housing and it does tick off a lot of boxes of things that we need, the squishiness and the feel and all of that does concern me.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go around the table again. Anybody else have further questions or comments?
I'm good, Andy. Thank you.
I'm here.
Oh.
Okay, I do have one that we haven't talked about yet that I have concern about, and it is density related, unfortunately. I mean, many other topics have been brought up, but this one I think is a new example, and that is the setback to the streetscape. I guess you could say, fortunately or unfortunately, we tend to be a community that has higher amounts of precipitation, particularly in the winter, than places further south or east of us. And snow and the place to store snow as it's cleared from the roadways and the sidewalks. We've seen problems in other developments with further setbacks than this is proposing, even further than the 6-meter setback that our zoning bylaw anticipates. And I'm just concerned that if we move the housing that close to the street, we're going to have a problem with where do people put their snow, or how do we clear the sidewalks, and what the cost is going to be to the municipality to truck snow away if that becomes too onerous. So I would ask that you maybe reconsider some of that and at least give us serious consideration to where can that snow go, because if we're going to have a double wide driveway and a porch on the front and a sidewalk across the front of the property, I'm not sure where that snow is going to go. And it does amount to a fair amount in our community. We're on the fringe of the snow belt, and that's a real issue that faces our community. And as we get to this higher density, this is an issue we're going to face more and more. We already do see it particularly in a couple of townhouse developments, and they do have greater setbacks than what's there as well. So just put that forward for your consideration. Marcus, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a valid comment, and definitely take it back. Just to be fair to us and to be fair to Stephen, when we were coming up with the proposed setbacks, I won't say it was a little premature, but we didn't really have a structured product in mind. We've been working on that kind of in the background over the last few months while the application's been in for comment. So I think what you'll see come back in the next submission will be some refinements to some of those setbacks, including the front yard setback, so that we can address some of those issues that you just brought up, including snow management and snow clearing. So I'm pretty confident when you see this the second time, some of those answers will be provided for you. But it's a valid comment, and we'll definitely take it back.
Yeah, and I would just add my voice to the stormwater issue. I mean, I think it's been well identified that that's a major issue, and you know, receiving this application at this point when we don't have a further refined stormwater management plan in place makes it just that much harder to to feel comfortable with it. So, and the one final comment I would make, and this is more to council and it is to you as the applicants, is you know, we've seen a number of development applications come forward, and if all of them come to fruition, we probably have a sewage capacity problem again in the not too distant future. And just to make a comment to you as well, Marcus, you are aware that we do have a sewage allocation policy in place that does tend to, what's the right word, manage the rate of growth in our community. So this issue that we've been dealing with for the past while of sewage capacity is not going away. And as development pressures continue, we do need to give consideration to how we're going to manage that. So just keep that in mind in the back of our minds as we go ahead. Dan.
I guess that kind of was part of my question, Mayor Lennox, but is this, Marcus, is this, would this development be a phased in project? Is it 5 phases or 4 phases? Or, I mean, when we talk about sewage allotment, you know, it has to be a phased in approach, I would assume. But how is it phased from your end?
Yeah, so to thank you, Councilor Yake. To answer the question, the answer would be yes. It would need to be phased. My understanding, and Mike or Dale can correct me if I'm wrong, based on the latest report from Triton, which I saw approximately 3 weeks ago, there's approximately 205 units remaining in the wastewater treatment plant, call it phase 1. So before having to go to a phase 2 wastewater treatment plant, there's approximately 205 units. Now, I'm not sure of any other applications that are in the pipeline at the moment, but the discussion that we've always had with Mike and his team is that there would be some sort of phased approach to this development, perhaps maybe a better portion of the units going within the phase 1 wastewater treatment plant, and then the other allocation of units would be allocated to the phase 2, and Cashier would have a commitment to participate with other landowners in the wastewater treatment plant upgrade of phase 2. So to answer the question, it would definitely be phased. There would be some sort of phasing. We haven't really spoken to staff as to where the phasing lines would be for this particular application yet, but I'm more than certain that the phasing lines would ultimately be determined on what allocation is available when we get to a draft approved stage.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Mike?
Mayor Lennox, just if I can maybe, for council's benefit, try to provide a little clarity around the sewage allocation piece. First, your comment, yeah, absolutely. Our policy now limits 15%, I believe, of the available units is granted on an annual basis through our allocation policy, the way it's currently written. The other part, and Marcus spoke about this well, but just as a clarification point, phase 1 of the Arthur wastewater treatment expansion is intended to get us 395 units. I'm pretty sure those numbers are right. To date, council has council and the county have pre-approved through actual plans of subdivision around 200 units. So that leaves 195. So we're, within 10 units, Marcus, but yeah, like those numbers are not, they change a little bit. So yeah, in terms of phasing and how we get to phase 2 of the wastewater expansion, Marcus did a nice job kind of conveying how that could potentially work. But yeah, Marcus and his team are aware of the policy itself. So yeah, there would be some phasing involved, and some not necessarily phasing through the plan of subdivision, Councilor Yake, but phasing as it relates to the number of building permits that could be issued in a year because of the policy. So if that helps a little bit, hopefully.
Yep, thank you.
I just want to just to reiterate or add on to Mike's point. I think staff have a lot of tools in their bag to kind of deal with allocation. It could be through phasing lines on the subdivision plan, or it could be through holding provisions in the zoning bylaw. There's a number of ways that we can go about it, but we're open to working with staff to come up with the right solution.
Sure.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Okay, any other questions or comments before we close off this evening's proceedings? Okay, so I think we're going to adjourn the public meeting for this application this evening. So I need just to hang on here. Let me get myself organized. I'm going to say that moved by Lisa, seconded by Dan, that the public meeting of November 23rd, 2020 be adjourned at 8:25 p.m. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we're adjourned from the public meeting. And then we'll go back to our regular council meeting. So thank you, Stephen, and all the members of the public that participated this evening.
Thanks very much.
And Marcus.
Thank you.
So next on our, we'll have to resume our council meeting. So have a motion here moved by Steve, seconded by Sherry. Just getting myself organized again. That the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North resume the November 23rd, 2020 regular meeting of council at 8:26 p.m. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to adoption of the minutes of the council meeting and public meeting. And I'm going to say this is moved by Dan, seconded by Lisa. That the minutes of the public meeting and the regular meeting of council held on November 9th, 2020 be adopted as amended. And I've got an amendment to include. Karen, do you have that you can read it off? Or?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so,
just a minute.
So we had a call from County Councillor Cork, just wanted some of the wording clarified. So Karen will share that with us.
Oh, there's so much paper. Let me see, just a second, sorry. All right, so the amendment will be, currently the minutes read, cell 2 is going down 15 feet well below the water table. That will be amended to read, the bottom of the excavation will be 15 feet down, but will stay well above the water table.
So it's just a clarification.
That's correct.
Okay.
I see Campbell Cork is as an attendee. Campbell, is that what you were thinking? Can you raise your electronic hand?
So you're gonna have to tell me what happens there, Karen, because I
Yep,
don't see
so-
it.
Okay, I'm gonna just proceed that was the,
That was the intent.
yes.
Okay, any objections to that from council? Okay, so then we'll approve those minutes as amended. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Oh, shoot. I'm not well organized, am I?
What?
We should have been having our budget presentation first. So let's go back to that. Nothing personal, Adam.
Adam, are you going to share your screen and do it, or you want? Yeah, okay.
No, certainly no. I'm happy to share.
Okay.
So the floor is yours, Adam, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor Lennox and members of council. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to continue discussion surrounding the 2021 budget for the township. So without further ado, really just picking up where we left off, previously discussed at the meeting, council meeting of November 9th, 2020, the capital program in its draft form would have suggested a total capital program approximating $16.2 million. And of that $16.2 million, the draft did contain some unfunded amounts and gave rise to a potential tax levy increase of 7.82%. Since the meeting of November 9th, there have been a number of internal conversations and discussions with members of council where we have identified a number of projects that have been slated for deferral in order to bring the capital program more in line with expectations in the hopes that would reduce the burden on the tax levy. So those projects are highlighted in this slide here. We, of the projects noted, there was the Mount Forest Service Club gateway signage. The conversation there was that that project was be deferred pending future funding opportunities. The rural broadband opportunity and the West Grey Lands opportunity assessments, both while deemed valid, there was some uncertainty in terms of the scope and the definitive actions coming from those particular opportunities. So those have been chosen for deferral. However, there is opportunity based on conversations to bring those in year as a capital addition once more information is known. The paving of Concession 4 North has been slated for deferral. Effectively, the conversation suggested the traffic volumes just did not warrant the expenditure for that particular project. The London Road paving, Section 1, it was deemed or considered that that project was perhaps just a little bit premature, and that's going to be put on hold for completion of future development works in that area. And then the conversation also includes some direction around interim measures that could include additional calcium application to mitigate some of the dust issues that have been encountered there. The Mount Forest, Sligo, and Main Street intersection enhancements, again, deemed to be a little bit premature, just given that though there is some potential completion of future development in the north end of town there. So that project, again, deemed a reasonable item for deferral for beyond the 2021 calendar timeframe. The Arthur Water Treatment Study, $25,000 being deferred pending results of the Arthur Water Supply Study, which is still shown prominently in the revised draft of the 2021 capital program. The Side Road 5 works from a rural resurfacing project perspective is being seen as maybe not necessarily as a high priority item, so that has been deferred. The resurfacing of the Kenilworth Municipal Office parking lot is also being deferred, and the 2015 Kubota sidewalk machine replacement is being slated for deferral as well. Just given the rapid replacement, it's felt that warrants a little bit of additional investigation around that. So in terms of projects out from the previous $16.2 million draft, just north of $1 million. So looking at the summary of the projects, the council directed projects now showing Wells Street, the Arthur BIA, the Mount Forest Pool being the items shown prominently there from the council directed projects standpoint, effectively dropping that ask from $1.9 million to approximately $1.2 million, with the caveat that the Wells Street extension would be contingent on the go ahead of the shared works facility or other development of the Arthur industrial lands requiring servicing. In terms of 20 and 20 initiatives, those projects remain the same, so no change there, and I won't go into great detail with some of these simply because they've already been presented and there hasn't been a tremendous amount of conversation around them. The development-driven projects remain static since the previous iteration. Administration would see the Mount Forest Downtown Wi-Fi project proceeding, no change there. The Wellington North Fire Service projects remain static as well, no change from previous iterations. The roads fleet, as previously mentioned, the 2015 Kubota sidewalk machine being deferred, so that ask being reduced from the $451,000 level to that of $391,000. Bridge culverts projects remain the same. However, through conversation, should we be eligible for some OSIF allocation on formula-based nature, Side Road 7 West was deemed a potential OCIF candidate, but other than that, the dollars don't change. Into the road segment, the engineering projects remain static. The full reconstruction projects also remain static. Queen Street East, just a comment there that that project go ahead would be contingent upon confirmation of successful connecting link application funding, and also viewed as a potential OCIF candidate to fund some of the township contributions towards that project. The gravel-based rebuild remains static. The resurfacing program, as previously mentioned, from the rural perspective, we had the carve-out or deferral of the Side Road 5 West project. And from an urban standpoint, the deferral of the Kenilworth Township parking lot being deferred for 2 future years. And just rounding out the roads, the additional kind of one-off projects identified, no change from the previous iteration. So roads now showing a total spend of just about $5.3 million. Sanitary sewers, no change from the engineering project standpoint, nor some of the reconstruction works. Those are all remain static when compared to the previous iteration that was presented on November 9th. Waterworks, very much the same. Engineering projects remain static, as do some of the one-off reconstruction projects and the independent water projects. So no change from the previous iteration there. And Parks and Recreation also remaining static. However, there's some conversation around the Arthur Community Center ice making piping rehabilitation project. Project completion potentially being contingent upon receipt of the formula-based OCIF allocation. But other than that, the total dollars in terms of ask remain static. So as previously mentioned, the $16.2 million from the previous iteration now showing as about $15.1 million in terms of the total capital program ask for 2021. So in summary, just showing some of the trends. The high water mark still being 2019, just north of $20 million. 2020 saw capital works of approximately $19 million, and the ask now for 2021 just north of $15.1 million. And from a funding standpoint, a couple items of note here. Most notably, the sustained OCIF still showing zero, taking a conservative route, although we are optimistic that we will be the recipient of that. We are not quite sure in terms of what that quantum might look like. And also in this iteration, there's zero unfunded amounts being shown to facilitate the $15 million ask from a capital standpoint. So in its current draft state, the capital program would suggest a requirement in terms of contributions from levy of about $2.27 million. As previously noted, all council directed projects remain in the 21 capital program. The ones that did make the cut are now fully funded, and uncertainty still certainly does remain around the 2021 OCIF formula-based allocation. So in current state, the $2.27 million contribution to capital would see a levy increase of 4.2% on the existing taxpayer. So in terms of next steps, staff seeking council direction as it pertains to the Arthur Community Center ice making piping rehabilitation. That's a bit of a standout project as it does require a contribution from levy of $232,000. So if we were to take that out or make that particular project contingent upon receipt of the OCIF dollars, we would be able to redirect some of those OCIF dollars to some of the other levy impacted items from a reconstruction standpoint, such as the bridge culvert on Side Road 7 West, or the township contributions to the Queen Street East connecting link, which if we were able to use an allocation of OCIF, we would be able to facilitate the $232,000 ask and effectively just reallocate funds between those projects. And if funded through OCIF, the $232,000 would come out of the previously mentioned $2.27 million which would give us a net levy increase of 1.2%. Absent the successful OCIF funding from a formula-based contribution standpoint, other alternatives do exist in order to facilitate the 1.2% levy impact, and those would be the utilization of either reserve funds or a debt issuance to facilitate the go-ahead of the Arthur Community Center ice making piping rehabilitation, absent a successful OCIF allocation contribution. That effectively brings me to a close. So really just seeking council direction in terms of whether we want to proceed with the Arthur Community Center ice making piping rehabilitation works being contingent upon OCIF, or if we want to perhaps look at other avenues to fund that particular project in order to facilitate a more palatable levy increase. I think that just about wraps it up for me.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. So just want to make a couple of comments just to kind of set the stage for some of the discussion and talk about a little bit of the efforts that have gone into this process. So we as members of council have got the duty of trying to give staff an idea of what we believe the priorities of our community are as a whole. And there's always challenges with having 5 different opinions about what those priorities are, potentially. So I know that staff have taken a look at a number of projects with some feedback from members of council, and have put forward a proposed capital program that may not make any of us totally happy in terms of match exactly what we think is the most important, but certainly tried to find a balance between those things. This is still, of course, if council wishes to have further discussion on some of those projects, of course we can, but just wanted to have kind of a shout out to the staff for tackling this tricky balance of trying to balance the needs of all members of council and trying to hit the targets that we have. So we'll open the floor for discussion. Of course, they do need direction, staff do need direction directly on the ice making piece for the Arthur Arena upgrades. And of course, any other discussion, concerns, comments are fair game at this point. So I'll open the floor for discussion. Anybody want to dive in here? Go ahead, Sherry.
So yeah, so I was the one that really wanted to see the Arthur Arena header pipes, or whatever we're calling it. These have been on the books for a while, and my comment when I was talking to staff was, it's all fine to have the building, but if we don't have to run the programs, then there's no point in having the building open. So these have been on the books probably before I was, which was a few years ago. So I think it's important to try and find the funds to make that project. Not exactly sure what all of the options are at this point. And I also had a question, and I didn't talk about this last week. The right turn lane at Mount Forest Drive, with some of the changes happening at the north end, would it be prudent for us to not potentially defer that? I know that that's a really busy area up there, but maybe some of those funds could be redirected somewhere else, because that's about a $75,000 ticketed item. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Mike, would you like to talk about those?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox, specifically Councilor Burke, as it relates to the Mount Forest Drive. I think it's a really good comment. From staff's perspective, we've kind of been waiting to see, we've heard, and there's been inquiries as it relates to the lands in that area, specifically next to the TSE lands, about potential growth out there. And we've kind of not moved forward with anything on Mount Forest Drive, trying to anticipate that there will be works that will impact that intersection as part of the growth, so that we would have some dollars for the township contribution of those works. That's been the thinking. I understand your comment around, you know, how long are we going to sit on those dollars. That's a fair comment, and certainly if that's the direction of council, we could look to use those dollars elsewhere if that makes sense at this point.
Anyone else like to comment? Steve? You're muted, Steve.
Just been talking to myself this whole night, I guess. Yeah, I think I'd like to see the Arthur ice making rehabilitation go ahead. I mean, there's no sense of having an arena if there's no ice in it to use. And with the lack of use, some might, up for this year at least, some might question why we should replace it at all. In fact, I would say this is probably the opportune time to replace it while that many clubs or the figure skating, hockey, men's hockey, all of it won't be that much affected if we were to go ahead with this project. Just with regards to the deferral for concession 4 North not being paved, I'm sure the traffic study was correct, and I know there's probably not a lot of traffic on there, but I think the traffic that is on there does a lot more damage than regular car traffic. I think with the pits there, I know we as a township use that road quite a bit, and I know Bi uses that pit quite a bit as well. I would like to see that go ahead, and I know we're trying to be fiscally restraining this year, just due to the circumstances that we find ourselves in. So I'm all right, only as long as we can really seriously address this in 2022. And thanks again to Adam and the rest of everyone tightening the belts and keeping this as possible, as low as we can possibly go, I think, while still moving the township ahead, which is where we should be, even though we have to exercise some restraint. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Anybody else? Dan, Lisa? Sherry, go ahead.
So I'd also like to comment on concession 4 North. So if it doesn't make the cut, which it hasn't so far, are there things that we can do to improve the circumstance of that road? We've been hearing about concerns on that road right from the get-go before Gents Pit opened. And that was, I believe, 4 or 5 years ago now. And is this project something that is being shelved for the long term, or is this something that would be rolled back in for consideration, or would have a council member have to bring it forward again next year?
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure how to address that exactly. It's always an opportunity for council members to bring things forward for discussion at any point in time. We usually start out the budget process with staff members bringing forward what they think were the highest priority projects. We always have more things, potential projects to do than we have funding for. So we're charged with the difficult job sometimes of saying, okay, there may be something that staff haven't seen as a high priority that we see as the elected representatives, and we have to say to staff, no, we need to back off on something else in order to accommodate a project like this or any of the other similar projects. but it will require a majority of council to move it forward at any point, whether it unless staff see it as a high priority, it will always require a majority of council to move it forward beyond that point.
Okay, so I guess I take that as that this is a council-driven project, so it's not going to be a road or roads department project that would be rolled over to the next year. So it would have to be driven by a council request through the residents.
I think what I'm trying to say, Sherry, is not that it couldn't be, but each year staff will come back and review the potential projects. I'm sure it will be one of them, and staff will be making a recommendation to us, as they have this year and previous years, of what they think the highest priority projects are. If that's included at that point, then that's fine. But if it's not included, we still have the opportunity to bring it forward beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'll go to Dan first. Well, Mike, did you want to add some clarity here?
I just was gonna, Councilor Burke initially had a question as it related to the maintenance of the existing road, the gravel road piece. And I don't necessarily have an answer, but Matt can maybe speak to, whether it's additional calcium applications, additional grading that happens because of the type of traffic on the road, things of that nature that might help with that answer. Matt, is that reasonable?
Okay, Matt, go ahead. Sorry, Dan, I'll just keep you waiting a little bit.
Yep, yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox. The roads team typically does do a double application over the summer on that road of calcium, just because it's recognized that that road takes traffic, and it experiences more traffic or more heavy traffic than some of our other roads. So we have, over the last couple of years, we have done a double application of calcium, which helps with dust. And I think that would be our continued way forward.
Okay. Did you have follow-up, Sherry, or is it okay if I move to Dan at this point?
No, go ahead.
Dan, go ahead.
All right, I'm not going back there. I'd like just to comment on the arena in Arthur. I think there's no way that we can't move ahead with this. This project, again, it's been talked about here. It's been on the books for a long time. Our arenas are valuable assets to our community. They're used in so many different ways, and there's no way we can let this deteriorate to the point where it can't be used, or that it puts us in an emergency situation. So I really, really want to see somehow that pushed forward, some in one way, shape, or another. And the other one, going back to the north end of Mount Forest, I know that we're waiting for possible development, but can we not start to get the ball rolling in regards to, we got to know what future development may look like to a certain degree in that area. So can we not start the ball rolling in regards to new design, discussions with the MTO, turning lanes, whatever the case may be? I think we need to push forward with that too, because I mean, we can't sit here and say, well, we're going to wait and wait and wait, because time for waiting is over on some of these projects. So those are the two items that I'd like to see move forward.
Okay. Lisa, did you have some questions, comments?
Not really any questions. I do agree that the Arthur Ice making that is a priority and it needs to go forward. The question is how we're going to fund that to keep the tax impact down. And I think that was, Adam's question, and I don't have the answers for that right now.
Okay. I know that in regard to that, staff are proposing that we do this contingent on OCIF funding, and at this point we don't have a definitive answer of whether OCIF funding will continue. I can tell you that at the county level we're going through budget process as well, and they are budgeting for OCIF as a allocation as a part of the budget, and I have a great deal of confidence that I think it will continue. Perhaps I'll be proven wrong and have to wear some egg on my face, but I think that we should proceed based on the fact that the OCIF funding will continue, and that would allow us to proceed with that project. It would allow us to make sure that we have adequate dollars in the funding for Queen Street and still allow us to keep the tax levy increase down under 2%. So I think that's a reasonable approach, unless council wants to go out on a limb and say that if we don't get this funding, that we're gonna take on some debt, or we're gonna do something else to do that. So I mean, I think those are options that we have at our disposal. I'm comfortable with proceeding based on contingent on the OCIF coming in, because I think it will come in. I think for the provincial government to say they're not going to fund that at this point, given the economic status of our province, would be really very difficult for them to do. Their provincial budget has suggested that there will be more spending, not less. So I would be shocked if that funding doesn't proceed, and I fully endorse and understand why staff have not said that it's coming. I mean, it isn't confirmed, so we're being appropriately conservative in this regard, but I'm pretty confident it's going to come, and I'm prepared to carry on that basis, which would allow us to do the project that everybody is talking about. Steve.
Yeah, and I'm hopeful of that funding as well, but I guess the question still has to kind of be posed: what happens if we don't? What are we prepared to do? How deep are we going to go? What are some alternatives? What projects get shelved because we don't get that funding? And as everyone has said, it's a priority to get the ice making pipe rehabilitation done. And I totally agree, and I wanted to get it done as well. But what happens if we don't get funding? What are we going to be prepared to cut out of the budget to keep it at 1.2?
And I would just offer a potential comment to that, Steve, in that this is the budget that we're talking about. This is what we're planning to spend dollars on. We can change our direction partway through the season if we need to, either reallocating resources. We are moving our budget process further ahead in time than we normally have, which I think is a beneficial thing, but it does lend us to this level of uncertainty with regard to funding. When we started this process, we didn't know what was happening to OMPF. Maybe before we're finished this process, we'll know what's happening with OCIF. Sorry to use all the acronyms, but I think we can proceed if everybody's comfortable with the budget process as it's presented, and if OCIF funds come back and say no, we're not going to get it, we can revise the budget at that point if we wish to. We can do it now, and there's no problem with discussing those options, but it's just what council is comfortable with is the way that we can proceed. Dan.
Andy, you had said earlier, though, that if the OCIF funding doesn't come through, there's other avenues to look at. One is possibly debt. So are you saying that we would have to take on debt to finance that particular project? Like, we haven't heard a lot about reserves in this budget, and we haven't, where the numbers are. Like, do we have reserves to cover this type of of project?
So I'll come to you in a second, Mike. I was just using debt as one example, Dan. Yes, of course, we do have options around reserves and other things as well. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we have all the options on the table.
Right.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
Mike, go ahead.
Yep, Mayor Lennox, just yeah, because I think we're speaking about the potential options, and Adam, to his credit, is prepared that he can maybe share a screen and let council have a look at where the reserves are, the reserve balances. So if we want to explore reserve funds as an option for that particular project, just to give a sense. So if council's comfortable, I'll maybe ask Adam to share his screen as it relates to the reserve fund piece, just so that there's, as Councillor Yake has said, that there's maybe a front of mind as it relates to where our reserve stands. Adam, are you comfortable with that?
You're muted, Adam, by the way.
Yeah, so just sharing the screen now with regards to the reserve balances. This is the balances as effective the end of Q3 2020. Not a tremendous amount of activity within the reserve and reserve fund balances throughout the course of the year. And it is still going to be subject to some of the year-end closure adjustments just through our existing capital program that we're currently working through. And some of the dollars have been earmarked within the capital budget as presented, but this does give you a fairly good indication in terms of where our reserve fund balances reside. So looking at it, I know there has been some facilities maintenance reserve funds earmarked within the capital budget, some of which to offset already some of the ice making rehabilitation works at the Arthur Community Center. So that would be the facilities maintenance reserve, but we do still have fairly healthy reserves in the tax rate stabilization reserve. Again, a discretionary reserve of council to be used as they see fit. So while there certainly is room available there, there's a number of different avenues we can go down in terms of funding that particular funding gap should OCIF not materialize.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. So I'm kind of at a disadvantage. I can't see other members of council. So if someone would like to speak up, that'd be great.
Sorry, Andy, can I just ask a quick question?
Sure, Steve, go ahead.
What reserves, if any, are in rec, Adam?
A few years ago, we'd undergone a bit of a consolidation process to mitigate the need to have defined reserves for specific business segments. And a lot of that consolidation did go into the tax rate stabilization reserve. So we do have the facilities maintenance reserve, which could be used for any municipal facilities, or the tax rate stabilization reserve, which could also be deemed a potential funding opportunity for some of our rec type items. Outside of that, we do have the mandated reserves by way of development charges, some of which would be specifically allocated to growth opportunities within the rec group.
Okay, thank you very much. Back to you, Mayor.
Okay, anybody else have questions, comments at this point? Please speak up.
So Adam, it's Dan here, Mayor Lennox. So the tax rate stabilization reserve can be used for anything that we deem appropriate or necessary, whatever the case may be. So there's already a reduction of 232,000 in there. And what's that for?
That was to fund some of the works associated with the 2020 capital budget. So as we formulated the funding for that budget, those reductions did come out of that reserve to facilitate that.
Okay, all right, okay. So if we needed to, we could use that stabilization reserve to fund that project. We could fund it, we could decide to fund it all, right? Or we could decide to fund it half of it. Or I mean, it's up to us really to kind of come up with that number, right?
Correct. Flexibility does exist there.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, we're all sitting here saying that this particular project needs to get done. We're also saying that we have to be mindful of every tax dollar available to us. You know, we have the opportunity here to use this reserve, pay for this project, get it done. It'll be done, and that arena will be set for the next, I don't know, as old as Steve is, 30, 40 years.
Thanks, Dan. I'll give you $5 later.
It'll last a long time. And if you spread it out over, 25 or 40 years, it really is a minimal amount. And it just is one of those things that's got to get done. And I think, we all hate really digging into our savings or our reserves, but at some point you gotta bite the bullet. And I think this is a prime opportunity that is easy to justify to the community and make sure that we keep our facility top notch.
Okay. Steve?
I have no rebuttal to you, Councillor Yake, but
thank you.
But I'm hopeful, obviously, that we get the funding, of course. But I think we have to have alternative measures in place in case we don't. And
absolutely,
the reason for reserves, I think, is probably for one of these projects that we can use that money for. I mean, what else is it going to be used for? We have reserves for reasons, and I understand it's not great to dig into reserves, but I wouldn't say it's a rainy day, but I don't want to be put into a spot where all of a sudden there's no ice in Arthur and it's the middle of the winter.
I would just add, I'll get to you in a second, Dan,
okay,
that some other municipalities are looking for budgeting. I mean, one of the reasons we're struggling so much with this is the fact that we're anticipating a revenue reduction, particularly from the recreation side of things. Other municipalities are approaching this differently in that they're not looking to maybe pull back as much on capital spending as we've kind of talked about, but instead do exactly what we're talking about, dip into a stabilization reserve and use that stabilization dollars to smooth this out. And so I have no problem with us dipping into that. I do think we do need to be aware, though, that we are facing an uncertain future. We don't know what this next year is going to look like or the year after. So I think we have to be a little bit cautious as to not deplete our reserves completely in this regard, that stabilization one in particular. So, I mean, I'm happy to proceed. I just want to throw that caution out there as well. Dan?
I'm going to support the mayor's prediction that we're going to get the funding. I think that's going to happen. I'm confident that if he's saying it, then I'm confident that it's going to work. But if it doesn't work, I think we got to have a backup plan and we got to do it. Because you're saying we're going to have a small, we're going to have a major revenue reduction in recreation already. We're going to have a real major reduction if we don't have an arena.
Fair enough. Mike?
So Mayor Lennox, I think what we're hearing is that, as opposed to maybe adjusting the budget when we get the funding in one direction, we would be doing the same thing as Councillor Yake has predicted and you have assured. We can show the budget showing the tax rate stabilization reserves, the 232,000, so that Adam can sleep knowing that he's got everything funded in the project. And then when the OCIF comes through, you and Councillor Yake and Adam will be able to have a nice celebration saying, well, geez, I told you we wouldn't have to use those reserves. I think it's an assurance in that we've heard from the majority of council, all of council, that this is a very important project. So I make light, but I'm not trying to make light. I think it's important that we know, and the community knows, and our staff knows that we're going to go and we're going to do the project. And if the OCIF comes through, that's great, but we're going to do this project no matter what. Exactly. And we budget in that manner. So that would be kind of my suggestion, that's the direction that I'm hearing from the majority of council at this point.
Yeah, I'm seeing lots of heads nodding, so I think you've got it summarized nicely, Mike. So I think, judging by the nodding heads, Adam, I think that's the direction that you were looking for in regard to that particular project. And I'm glad Dan has so much confidence in my predictions, and we will look forward to getting the confirmation that those dollars are coming. So
Absolutely.
Maybe have a celebration at center ice.
Right on.
So
Karen?
Nodding of heads doesn't come across in the written minutes. So can I just summarize what the direction to staff will be? That you're proceeding with the ice rehabilitation project in Arthur to be funded from the tax rate stabilization if OCIF funds are not received? No.
I wouldn't put the if part in.
Okay.
If OCIF comes back, Adam and staff will need to come back to council and say, hey, we've got the OCIF funding, and we'll present something else. But I think we proceed without the if part on, so that it's clear that we're moving ahead with this project.
So that it will be funded from the tax stabilization reserve.
Yeah, that portion of the projects will be funded from the tax rate stabilization reserve.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for summarizing that so keenly. What other items do we have to have? Has anybody got anything else that feels strongly that we need to further discuss at this particular point in time? Okay, so I guess the next, go ahead. Did you have something, Steve?
No,
Okay.
sorry, I'm just saying I'm good, thank you.
So I guess just looking at Adam and Mike and thinking about the next steps in this process, I think we have one meeting in December. I think the intent was that we would hope to get this approved at that point. So I just, maybe a review of the process from here.
Sure. Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox, and Adam and Karen can correct me when I go off track here. But the intent, I think, really is now we feel like we have clear direction from council as it relates to the levy and the capital program. We do need to do a public presentation of the budget and look for some feedback from the public, just in case there are some adjustments that will come out of that. So that will be the intent, is to do that at the December 14th meeting, to advertise it publicly, use that meeting as also kind of the budget open house, for lack of a better term, and that hopefully there aren't significant changes that come out of that. I don't anticipate that. That hasn't been our experience, and that we would probably pass the bylaw itself at the first meeting in January.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Is all members of council comfortable with that timeline?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Seeing lots of nodding heads, so I think that's good. Okay, is there, from a staff perspective, Mike or Adam, is there any other items that we need to sort out here? Adam?
Nothing from my perspective. I think we've got a clear line of sight now in terms of what the expectations are of council, and we can proceed on that basis for the public meeting for December 14th.
Okay. Thank you both, and thank you to all the staff that have all the inputs into this as well. I recognize that this is not a small project for staff on an annual basis, and so, and especially since we've accelerated this timeline and also done that under more challenging circumstances, I would like to thank all staff for your participation in this process to this point. Mike, I saw you with your hand up.
Yeah, just very quickly, Mayor Lennox, you made a comment leading into the budget conversation that maybe not everybody on council would be fully happy with the budget. I would say that also goes for staff. We have to make difficult decisions amongst departments, amongst staff, about projects, and everyone's passionate about the projects that get presented. So that's we all feel the pain associated with budget. And I give tons of credit to all of staff for being mature about the process, and for Adam for pulling it all together. and for council, their participation. I know it's been a little awkward this year because of where we are, but I appreciate the efforts that everybody put into it. So thanks for that.
Thanks, Mike. And I wasn't trying to imply that nobody was happy. Just that when we reach a compromise that's the best for the community as a whole, there's bound to be a certain level of unease or unhappiness with all of it. So, but I think we can all feel confident that we're doing the best we can to keep our community in the best position as a whole. Okay, with that out of the way, I think our next thing is items for consideration. So do we have any items on that list that council would like to pull out for some further discussion? Steve.
Mayor, I'd like 3A, the 2020 water and wastewater rate study.
Okay. There's a fairly short list tonight of items I see, so I think staff were giving consideration to not overload us when we're dealing with budget as well. So is there any others anybody would like to pull out for discussion? I'm seeing some shaking heads. Dan, did you have any?
Nope.
Okay, I don't think I have any further ones either. So that means we need to deal with all the others. So we're just pulling out 3A. So to deal with all the others, I've got a motion here moved by Lisa, seconded by Dan, that all items listed under items for consideration on the November 23rd, 2020 council agenda, with the exception of those items identified for separate discussion, be approved and the recommendations therein be adopted. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we're back to 3A. And I'm going to make you the mover of this, Steve, since you asked for it.
Fair enough.
And seconded by Sherry. And now you're going to have to listen to me read it. So the recommendation is that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North approve the revised OREG 453/07 Water System Financial Plan number 113-301A and Wastewater Financial Plan prepared by DFA Infrastructure International Inc. dated November 13th, 2020. And further, the Council approve the 2020 Water and Wastewater Rate Study prepared by DFA Infrastructure International Inc. dated November 13th, 2020. And further, the Council direct to post a copy of the revised OREG 453/07 Water System Financial Plan number 113-301A and Wastewater System Financial Plan dated November 13th, 2020 on the Township website. And further, the Council directs staff to submit a copy of the revised OREG 453/07 Water System Financial Plan number 113-301A and Wastewater System Financial Plan dated November 13th, 2020 to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And further, that the resolution of Council approving the revised OREG 457/07 Water System Financial Plan number 113-301A and Wastewater System Financial Plan dated November 13th, 2020 be submitted to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks as required as a part of the municipal drinking water license renewal application. Okay, I'll open that up for discussion, but I will comment that if my English teacher had seen me write a sentence like that, I would have failed. Comments or questions?
I guess I'll go ahead, Mayor Lennox, thanks. And I don't think my question is going to be as long as your read. No, just with the public meeting that we had today and read the agendas beforehand, it just made me ask, I know when it says we have approximately, where is it? About 30 million, 29.2 million in projected wastewater. And is that based on our own 15% of allotments, or is this a county growth projection?
Okay, maybe you can, if you understand what he's asking, Matt, that's great. I'm a little fuzzy yet, so.
Okay, so we were just chatting about phase one. Had 394 houses or allotments that were available.
Right.
And right now there's an approved of 200. So if the way we're doing that measurement, will that actually get us, I guess, to 2030, which is only 10 years away? And is the 29.2 million, is that accurate? Is that our own thinking, or is this through the study or through county growth numbers?
So
I just want to see if that's an accurate number. Sorry.
Where's the 29 million coming from, Steve? Is that a capital investment?
Projected water-related capital expenditures and approximately 20.8 million in projected wastewater-related capital-related expenditures. And I know it's full cost recovery, but I just was wondering, like, how did they come up with those numbers specifically? I guess this is the ultimate question. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Through you, Mayor Lennox, DFA used the growth, the 2018 growth plan as kind of the input to that study. So it would be, the projections they're doing would be based on that growth study.
So, and that would also use our the development charges study as well, which identified capital projects such as the sewage treatment plant, new water towers, the trunk line extensions, those types of things. Is correct, Matt?
Yeah, if it was going to be funded from development charges, it was considered in this study, but then it was sort of backed out as far as it wasn't funded. It wasn't expected to be funded from user fees.
Okay, so
Okay, thank you.
Just the 29 million that Steve's referring to then is upgrades to our existing systems, such as water main replacement and equipment replacement, rehabilitation of capital assets, that type of thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's over a 9-year. That's over a 9-year period from 2021 to 2030.
But that's built up based on project information, correct? It's not a number pulled out of the air. It's a list of projects that are anticipated with an estimate that goes with each.
Correct.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Steve?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments in regard to this, Dan?
I mean, we certainly are all aware of the fact that, our costs are going to rise, and over the next few years, there's a lot of things that got to get done, and we've talked about it here tonight during the budget discussion. And when we get a staff report that asks us to increase rates, we all understand the fact that why they're asking us to do that. But if there was any year not to have an increase, it's next year. And I think that we've done the right thing here moving forward. And, we've managed in the past and we'll manage in the future. So I think this is a good decision.
Okay. So just for clarification, Matt, from the previous iteration of this study, the biggest, and maybe you or Adam or whoever can comment on this, the biggest change really is in what the reserve balances will look like at the end of the period. Is that correct?
Correct.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, correct, Mayor Lennox. It's really just adjusting sort of what, if you will, our bank account balance was coming into the study and what it is going out because of the 0% in 2021 decision.
Right. So as Councillor Yake has rightly commented, this is a potentially difficult time for our residents, and we're trying to recognize that, but we also have to try to balance that as we go forward with how do we get the necessary work done and still have the dollars to do it. So this is a decision we're making for today, knowing that it may influence decisions in the future as well. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So that brings us to a notice of motion. Anybody have a notice of motion this evening?
I do not.
Okay. Okay, then we'll move on to community group meeting program report. Does anybody have anything they'd like to talk about in regard to that, or items of community concern that they'd like to talk about? Councillor McCabe?
Yes, I'll go ahead. I just had, excuse me, last Thursday, had a special meeting of the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority that came out, or that we held with regards to the possible omnibus bill going through that has, among other things, perhaps the future of conservation authorities at stake. I sent that, I believe, to you and to Karen. You've already had it, Karen, and then to Mike. I think that would be great to have that up on the website. It effectively removes the backbone almost from the CAs across Ontario and gives it to the province without little regard to actually having local people on the ground that actually live in the member municipalities of each CA. So I think that's something worth reading. I think there's a slideshow. But then also just today, the Nuclear Waste Management Organization has announced in conjunction with the SVCA to offer well water improvement programs within the watershed municipalities as well. So this will go for properly decommissioned abandoned wells, and then on private or public land, and then wellhead protection as well on private and public land as well. I think if I could ask Karen or Mike to put that up on our website so that the people in our township, and perhaps send that over to Minto as well in case they did not get it at their township. I think that would be prudent. And that's all I've got.
Okay, I'm just going to ask you a question in regard to that, Steve.
Sure.
So the County of Wellington and the GRCA kind of manages it, but offers funding dollars through the Rural Water Quality Program that does deal with private well decommissioning and upgrading. Would this be a second opportunity for residents to access funding, or is it? I guess who's eligible, and is it something they could top up from the existing program?
It would be, as far as I know, and I've only gotten this just today, just before the council meeting. It is open to people that fall within the watershed. So that would be our municipalities, as well as the other member municipalities that are in the SVCA watershed. And again, it's up to a certain percentage as well. But as far as I know, it is open to the residents. But Karen may have better insight.
I can just throw it up. I can throw it up on the screen real quick. The email that came in.
Okay.
So you can do well decommissioning if you're on private property outside of municipal drinking water wellhead protection. 100% of the cost up to a maximum grant of $1,000. And if you're on private property within a municipal drinking water wellhead, $1,000 up to a maximum grant of $2,000. And that's the interior well decommissioning 2-tier. And then there's wellhead protection as well for grants up to $750 and $1,500.
Okay. So I guess so the program that's administered by the Grand River Conservation Authority through the Rural Water Quality Program is funded by the County of Wellington. So it looks like that people in the SVCA watershed within Wellington County would have an opportunity to choose which program they may wish to use to assist them with their wells.
I would agree with that. The check that was out today was for 50 grand, so I'm not sure how far that will go either. So.
Yeah, and I just maybe I mentioned it already, but the county funding in Wellington County for that, while it's administered by the GRCA, it does apply to all the watersheds within Wellington County too, whether it be SVCA Maitland Valley or GRCA. GRCA has an agreement to working with those other CAs to deliver the program. Lisa, did you have a comment?
As someone who sits on the Rural Water Quality Committee, that was kind of my point, is that we do have representation from all the CAs. So we do have conservation staff that come down from Saugeen, Upper Credit. I think, what is there, 7 or 8 actually watersheds within Wellington County?
7 at least.
Conservation. Yeah, so it's quite a big area that we look at.
So it's a good announcement, Steve, and gives, you know, if the dollars are short, gives more people an opportunity to take advantage of that.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Anybody else have anything community group program or related to like to talk about? Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah, actually the well program is probably one of the more popular things with the Rural Water Quality Program. I just wanted to comment, anyone who hasn't been to Arthur, the new Christmas lights, I drove through them last night in the dark with the snow and everything. They look absolutely amazing. So check them out, they look awesome. We did have the first BIA annual general meeting, and that went quite well. Considering we had it virtually, we even had a couple other members of the BIA that are not directors that attended, so that was good. Let's see, we did have a meeting with the Arthur Chamber, of course, and it was a relatively short meeting. They're considering doing a number of things, like they're talking about the growth of Arthur and making up welcome packages for new residents and stuff like that, featuring businesses. They were also talking about something COVID related, kind of a healthy bodies, healthy minds contest, because they're worried about people right now. The Mount Forest Chamber, doing a big social media push that's been very successful. They've had actually both Arthur and Mount Forest. Arthur had their awards, the Arthur Chamber, and the Mount Forest has their awards of their excellence awards, and they both have received a record number of nominations. So that was across both of them. The Shop Wellington North portal hasn't been getting a whole lot of action, so they're trying to do a social media push on that. And their AGM will be going virtual as well, and they were trying to figure out a few different options so that everyone could vote and as many people could attend. That's it for my report.
Okay. Anyone else have something they'd like to share this evening? Steve?
Sorry, I meant to mention this, not that I'm on Optimis's, but they did a hell of a job on Saturday in front of the food bank in Arthur from 11 until 3 p.m. And I don't know if you had a chance to go, excuse me, on Twitter or Instagram to see the results of their work. The bus was just filled with a ton of donations, food stuffs, and children's toys that'll be distributed through the Arthur Lions Club hampers as well. So I wanted to give them a shout out as well. I'm not part of the Lions or the Optimists, but they did a hell of a job.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Dan or Sherry, did you have anything you'd like to share this evening?
No, I'm good.
No, thank you.
Okay. I know I started off with talking about COVID-19 at the beginning of the meeting, and I hate to be a downer and finish off with come back to that topic, but I wanted to share the fact that sat in on a conference call meeting this morning with our medical officer of health, Dr. Mercer, this morning, along with the mayors and CAOs of all the municipalities across the county. And you know, as we all are aware, the numbers in Wellington County are rising, and much quicker than we want. This infection is in our community. It is being transmitted in our community. and they were looking for ways that we could help support getting behavior to change, maybe help move people from a state of complacency to make sure that everybody's doing what's required to help slow the spread. One of the things that the actions that came out of that is the county is funding an advertising campaign through the radio. So I will be recording an ad maybe as early as tomorrow to run on the river, and probably trying to take on some more communication activities related to getting the word out and trying to reinforce the behavior that'll help keep everybody safe. And I would just ask members of council, if you have ideas or things that you feel you could do to support that, I'd be delighted to hear about it and support you in your activities so that we can do what we can to keep our community safe and try to avoid moving into the red zone under the provincial guidelines. One of the things that the red zone may imply that I don't think any of us really want to contemplate is that we'll probably make minor hockey and figure skating impractical, which probably will then result in us not having use of our ice facilities in the future, and probably will spell the end of those activities for this season completely. And it will also have a very negative impact on some of our retailers, and because of the restrictions that go along with that. So I think now is the time that we have to all figure out what we can do to try to keep us in the orange zone as opposed to moving into the red zone. And so if you have ideas and thoughts, please feel free to share them, and we'll see if we can put something into activity. I know that there was some discussion around increased enforcement, again, to try to make people realize how important this really is. So there's some discussions going on in that regard. You may have heard the province has announced more fines possible around following public health restrictions, and so that in combination with increased communication are some of the things that are underway. And so we're looking for other ways to get the message out there. So I'm happy to have any of your thoughts and comments, whether it's here now or over the next few days. That would be wonderful. Any final comments on that before we move on? Okay, so I guess that brings us to our confirming bylaw. And moved by Lisa, seconded by Dan, that bylaw number 99-20 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North at its regular meeting held on November 23rd, 2020, be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And that I draw your attention to the meetings announcements, but there really isn't a whole lot. The Recreation Parks Committee meeting coming up December 8th, and our last council meeting, regularly scheduled council meeting of the year, on December 14th. And with that, move on to adjournment. Moved by Steve, seconded by Sherry, that the regular council meeting of November 23rd, 2020 be adjourned at 9:38 p.m. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you, everyone, and hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, Andy.
Right.
Good night,
Bye.
everybody.